Siege last season. Houston ranked outside the top 20 in pass block win rate, sacks allowed, pressure percentage as well. On top of that, the offensive line ranked 31st in run block win rate. We got Matt Miller here with us today as well. We'll get into the draft a little bit more with Matt too. But Lewis, you like this move?
Yeah, simply because they need more bodies and they need someone to really kind of like come into the fold here and really like inject some physicality. You see that run block win rate metric right there. I mean, that is something that Cam has always been good at, going back to his days at Alabama, to his days in Jacksonville. At one time when he was with the Jaguars, he was the go-to guy in terms of the side of the line of scrimmage that Doug Peterson wanted to run behind because of his ability to come off the ball and really establish a physical presence, which is something I'm sure that Joe Mixon is saying, yeah, we could use some of that down here in Houston. So, yeah, they need to continue. This is just the tip of the iceberg as far as the kind of thing that they need to go ahead and build out and really kind of retool in regards to their offensive line. There's a lot of work yet to be done.
Yeah. I don't know why Louis Riddick is not on during, like, the regular season, especially on, like, NFL Live that much. He seems to really only be a main go-to person during the off season, but he's such a grounded person, and I really kind of appreciate his perspective, and I totally agree. Like, this has to be just the tip of the iceberg for the Texans. There is kind of a somewhat feeling with the Texans of kind of just like, right, we blew everyone out, not in terms of like games, but we blew everyone like away, I should say, with CJ Stroud's rookie year, and then this last season we couldn't just get things quite connected, and of course there was injuries and whatnot, but even so, there was just not a smoothness. Quite frankly, a lot of similarities between the Texans and the Green Bay Packers, and ironically, those were two teams that I was like, they're going to be great this next season, like, let's go, and they could just never really connect. Even when things were going well, even when they were winning, it still just never felt, I still never felt like I was getting high quality, complete games out of the Texans. And to me, that often signals coaching more than anything. And, especially with the O-line, of course it's bodies, right? You need the talent and getting good, guys in those positions. It's not the easiest thing. Everyone thinks that you can just kind of get these big bodies like they're just kind of anywhere to be found. And it's just not the reality, actually. But some of it is also coaching, and also kind of like how you're going to, get after it in terms of, what plays you're going to run and how you're going to run them. Just the actual, the actual mechanics of it all. It's not just saying, well, we have a talented O-line, therefore we're just now going to have a good O-line or a great O-line. Some of it is actually like, well, what is the design here when we're trying to run the ball, for instance? Like, it's not like you're just calling hike and now you're just like, I gotta stop the defensive line to get after it, I just gotta block them. Like, there's actual plays that are actually being done in a way that is going to enhance your ability to run the ball. It's not just hike and then it's just body on body, just trying to fight each other and see who wins. As much as that's what it looks like when you're watching it on TV, and especially when you're watching it in a more zoomed out kind of lens or view. And I think that gets lost when you're sometimes having O-line issues. And that's what I kind of kept saying about the Texans and especially even the run game, which is no surprise that they were so poor in the run game, that it wasn't just that the O-line itself was poor, but it was just the way how they went about it. It did feel like it was just like, well, we're just going to call hike and we're just going to hope that our offensive line is just going to be able to just, kind of just push the defensive guys around, and we're just going to have to just kind of hold each other a little bit, and then hopefully our running back's going to be able to find his way through to get like 4 or 5 yards. Like, there was no actual play design that was like, I like this. This is what I like to see. In the beginning of the season, it felt like there was a little bit of that. I think it was like the Monday night football game or the Sunday night football game, and I was so excited. And I was like, I remember I wrote in my notes, I was like, wow, Bobby Slowick, that was awesome. I forget which one. It might have been against the Chicago Bears, actually. So this was earlier on in the season. I remember being like, oh my gosh, Bobby Slowick, like, yes, let's go. Like that was beautiful play design, beautiful execution, beautiful time to call the play itself, perfect timing. And I was all about it. And I remember as soon as I wrote that on my notes, like literally right after, whoever was commentating that game, like pretty much echoed what I said. I think it was Sunday night, because I think it was oh god, I can't think of his name. The guy who does Sunday Night Football, the wide receiver. He's famous, popular, and I've known him forever. I can't think of his name. And so I was like, yeah, this is great. And then like from that point on, from game after game, it was like I was never able to like make that note in my notes from that point forward. And so it was like kind of like, what's going on here? So make no mistake about it. Not only do they need the bodies, but they also need the execution. They need the will. They need the purpose, the intentionality of all of these things. Because even if you look at a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, like everyone talks about how amazing their O-line was. And this is where metrics are weird and interesting, because you can look at like a PFF ranking. You can look at ESPN analytics, which I actually looked at this morning in terms of the run block win rate and the pass block win rate and all of these things. And when you kind of look at it, like you can technically make the argument that a team like the Commanders, the Broncos, a couple various other teams, that they actually have, a better, like, whether it's being run or pass block win rate. And then you're kind of just like, all right, well then why are so many people saying that this O-line, for the Philadelphia Eagles, for instance, is so much more dominant, et cetera, et cetera. And it's because it's not just the bodies. It's not just calling hike and then trying your best to make sure that the defense, doesn't get to your quarterback or get to your running back. It's the plays themselves as well. No difference than, if you're doing a route with a wide receiver or a tight end, which it's just so much harder to see and harder to describe, quite frankly, when you're watching it on TV, which is why they so rarely talk about it, very briefly occasionally, especially if you have like kind of someone like I can't think of anyone's name today, like a Romo, or even an Aikman. Like I feel like they'll kind of highlight it, and they've highlighted it in a lot of run heavy teams like the Philadelphia Eagles, for instance. And I just think when you kind of really zoom into that aspect and understand kind of what's happening, you can then kind of compare it to other teams and see where they're lacking in that regard. So, the real point that I'm trying to drive home is that for the Texans, like, it was a multifaceted issue that they had. And it wasn't just, well, they just don't have good enough guys at the O-line. That if they just had better guys, that it would be better. Don't get me wrong, like, it would be better, but there was still also like a fundamental, essentially lack of caring of getting the job done in this regard. Like it was just like a lack of a priority, it felt like, and it's just, I find that very confusing, quite frankly. It didn't make a whole lot of sense, and that's how you get, some of these things. But like, this is what I was talking about. This is, the left column is more defense, and the right two columns are offense, for the O line. And this was the Eagles, 6% or not 6%, ranked 6th and ranked 9th. And yet, especially after they won the Super Bowl, everybody was like, they had the best O-line in football. And it's just kind of like, maybe because then here's the Washington Commanders, 9-2. So you're like, okay, well, didn't the Commanders have a better O-line then? So it's just like, I actually want to make a separate video about metrics like this, because I think they're significantly trickier to kind of unpack, honestly. There was a lot of the conversation about the Bills having such an awesome O-line, and here we go 4-17. And don't get me wrong, once you're in like 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, that's obviously great. But you have the run block win rate, and it's the Buffalo Bills were 17. And also when you see such a disconnect between pass block win rate and run block win rate, sometimes that could be just kind of where individual linemen are just kind of at their best, what you want to be able to do with them, and kind of how they fit the offense. And other times it's like that's kind of where coaching is kind of really highlighted, where they know how to get the job done in one aspect, but not, not both in terms of, pass and run. So it's tricky. It's tricky because, again, let's go to PFF now. Well, first, before I do that, you can see the Houston Texans 22 and 31. 22nd for pass block win rate and 31st for run block win rate, which is interesting because I don't even think. So yeah, PFF for the run block is 27 for the Houston Texans, and then pass block is 19. So yeah, I think when you're looking at the O-line, I feel like it's a lot easier just to kind of sit back and evaluate the passing game of run game, how good a wide receiver is, how good a quarterback is, how good, tight end, etc. Tight end's probably a little bit hard too because they also deal with blocking and some of the other dirty details that you don't always get to see. But I think like trying to evaluate, which is so interesting because you keep hearing so many people say different things. Because again, Denver Broncos, number one O-line. I mean, like, throughout the year, how many people were talking about how great that O-line is for the Arizona Cardinals, the Green Bay Packers, Tampa Bay Buccaneers? People definitely said about the Denver Broncos, but people kept saying what made the Eagles so great was their O-line. Okay, well then here are these other teams that had great O-lines. Arizona Cardinals, what happened? It's the trenches. Okay, well they have a top O-line. So where did things go wrong? Where what is this? We talked about all season about how the Chicago Bears, had a bad O-line. Again, PFF pass block, Chicago Bears ranked 9th, better than the Atlanta Falcons. And people talked about the Atlanta Falcons having such a great run game, and so much of it was because of how they execute their run game with their run block. And then it's no surprise, boom, there you go. It was actually perfect. I didn't know they were officially going to be one, but there you go, boom, they're number one according to PFF. And it's more than, again, just the bodies, because you can see that they then drop all the way down to 9th for the pass block. So again, combination of bodies, combination of execution. I'll be honest, and I'm definitely would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this, like how you evaluate analytics like this, because I'm way more comfortable with other forms of advanced analytics. For this, I think, again, I think when the Eagles, the Bills, the Lions, like these are all perfect examples of these teams where we see them having great O-lines, and everyone's talking about how great those O-lines are, and yet there's other teams that are, not. Kansas City Chiefs, here we go, 8-7. And it's just like everyone said that their O-line was awful. And yet if we just take this at face value, we're like, oh, this is pretty good, top 10. So what else do you want? You want top 5? You want top 4? Everyone talked about the Eagles. The Eagles were 9. Technically from the run block win rate, the Kansas City Chiefs were better than the Philadelphia Eagles. Yet the story of the Super Bowl was that the Eagles have the O-line locked and ready to go. So, it's I don't know. Honestly, it's that's why, like I said, I'm genuinely curious to see kind of how you guys interpret some of these things, because even something like a sacks allowed, and although I don't think that this was CJ Stroud's fault, even just sacks allowed, although I wonder if any of these advanced analytics are actually considering when the sack is actually on on the O-line or on CJ Stroud. I guess I can find that out right now, because if he was just sacked a total number of 54 times, then it's obviously just the pure number and not like an advanced analytic where they credit it to, CJ versus, the O-line. Yeah, and this is what's so interesting, because, so you see there, 54 sacks. If you go to PFF, 52 sacks. So that's why, you would think a lot of this stuff is standardized, or even it's like a shared pool of data. but it's not. And this actually happens a lot. And granted, it's not that big of a deal. It's 2. But little things like this actually happen more regularly than you would guess. You would think, again, it's a shared pool of data that then somehow kind of gets like exported to any of these various things, like a PFF getting the official data from an NFL database or whatever it is. But and then again, it's just kind of then like who's right. But like I said, the stakes for this are obviously low. But because even when you look at the pressure percentage, PFF, they don't have it officially calculated, but when you look at dropbacks with pressure and then how many dropbacks he had, it's actually 37%, and they have it at 35%. So it's all actually technically, well, I guess it depends how you want to look at it. The sacks technically a little bit less, but more pressure. So yeah, it was a mess of a season, and that's why I kind of take such issue with people lumping this season onto CJ Stroud and like, oh, sophomore slump and this and that. No, this team was clearly dealt with injuries, slightly overvalued just to begin with. Coaching, clearly not exactly what they thought. I'm still not closing the door on Bobby Slowick. I think considering some of the issues and some of the injuries that he kind of dealt with, I think you're probably potentially asking too much from a pretty young coach at this point in his career. And I just don't know if he was in a position to be able to overcome that. We saw Shanahan unable to make an offense look good enough. And with all of his in and out injuries, and that's someone who has significantly more experience. And so I'm just not gonna 100% hold Bobby Slowick's feet on the fire, but I will hold him accountable for some of the lack of for not figuring out any type of solutions for some of these issues, and not even trying to work around them in a way that was like, what you have, you kind of have to adapt and make some changes. And I didn't see that, quite frankly. It felt like someone who was just essentially kind of playing like a video game, and they were just like, I'll hit X now, I'll hit square now, I'll hit triangle now, and it was kind of just like, what are we trying to do here? Quite frankly, I saw similar things with Kevin O'Connell, who I love as a coach, from the Lions game to the Rams game. It was like, what adjustments did you make? You saw how you got exposed in that game. What changes did you make from the Lions game to the Rams game? Nothing. Again, that's on coaching, 100%. So I always find it interesting when you're trying to figure out how much is on the guys on the field, how much is on coaching, from both the pros and the cons, the wins and the losses. Not always the easiest thing to do, sometimes messy, especially if you're trying to use like some of these more advanced analytics to try to tell the story, and especially if you're going to try to use your memory of how games unfolded at this point, because now it's like, I don't remember exactly how week 7 unfolded, and when I had a big issue in week 9 with how the Texans played, and these are made up weeks, like, and I remember reaching like a firm conclusion. It's like, well, I don't remember now what exactly I saw in that moment that made me solidify this analysis of the of this team, which is why I do, for the most part, once the season's over, I'm no longer an expert, and I say that very lightly, an expert on how the season unfolded, because it's already a distant memory. I just don't remember it as well as I did when it was happening. And so I'm a kind of a big fan of just being like, it doesn't matter now, it's over. Like, we reached our conclusions. Now we're moving on. And last year no longer even matters, because we're on to the next season. They don't even have the same guys, same team, same coaches. Like, there's too many differences to even remotely compare it to the year past. So hopefully the Texans can kind of turn the page. And yeah, I echo what they said earlier, is that this has to be the tip of the iceberg for the Texans, and one of many changes, one of many moves. And I would just love to, at the heart of it, to just see more aggressive coaching, where you can actually see the coaching on the field. Like, that's what I want to see. I don't want to just see guys call hike and play football. I want to be able to watch a Texans game and say, that's the fingerprint of the coaching staff right there. That's it right there. Did not see that for the offense throughout the season. Injuries or no injuries, you still didn't see it. You saw Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid had a million injuries, and you can point to, yep, that's Andy Reid right there. They won that game. They scored that touchdown. That was Andy Reid's fingerprints. And not everyone's going to be Andy Reid, but like, pretty much never saw that in a Texans game. I saw just backyard ball, just say, hey man, let's just try our best. CJ Stroud call hike and see what happens. But that's my long rant because I still am frustrated with the Texans and kind of how this all unfolded. But like I said, turn the page, new season, let's go. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Houston Texans and kind of some of the moves that they're making so far this offseason and kind of, all of the issues that they had last season and kind of, the connection between coaching as well as just the talent / bodies themselves. Would love to hear your thoughts. And also, again, like I said earlier, would love to hear your thoughts on kind of when you look at stats like this, kind of, what's your own personal preference in terms of kind of unpacking some of these things, even if they don't 100% align with one another. Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. So whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.